ولا كتاب بعد كتابه ولا شريعة بعد شريعته ولا صحابة بعد صحابته. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألف لام ميم. غلبت الروم في أدنى الأرض وهم من بعد غلبهم سيغلبون. وقال النبي العربي الهاشمي وعليه أفضل الصلوات وأكمل التحيات وأزكى المباركات: لتفتحن القسطنطينية فلنعم الأمير أميرها ولنعم الجيش ذلك الجيش. صدق الله العلي العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم، ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Today, inshallah, I want to spend some time talking about the history of the conquests of namely Iran, Palestine, Syria, and Jordan. I mention this because many of us as Muslims today, we are lost of who we are. We don't know what our existence is. We don't know what our parents' existence is. As a great alim once said, نحن في تراثنا كما نحن في عالمنا. We as Muslims live in our past like we live in the world. There is no escape from it. We have a 1400-year past that we have forgotten. Right? And as I mentioned today in our tafsir, what was the first mistake of Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam was that he forgot, fanasa. Right? That's literally what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. So this forgetting has caused us this deep rupture and division within us and our past. We don't know who we are, where we were, and where we're supposed to be going. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spends the majority of the Quran about the past. There's very little in the Quran about the future, which is very interesting. Except for the 30th juz and some ayat here or there, the majority of the Quran is about the past. So when people say that, oh, why are Muslims stuck in the past, nostalgically, romantically? The reality is that Allah told us to do so. What does Allah say in the Quran? لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي قَصَصِهِمْ عِبْرَةٌ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. In the past, there are ethical stories for you. لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ, but if you have a heart. And this idea, right, of that these stories of Islam in the past fortify our heart. Where do I get that from? Allah says in Surah Hud, وَكُلًّا نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الرُّسُلِ مَا نُثَبِّتُ بِهِ فُؤَادَكَ. Addressing the Holy Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, that, oh Muhammad alayhi afdal salawat, that why do we narrate these stories to you? To fortify your heart, literally to fortify your heart. And we lack in this fortification of our heart. We can do as many programs, right, about what does it mean to have a solidified or a fortified heart. But Allah says here that in the stories of the past, you will literally fortify your heart. This is truly dil ki baat, right? This is how to sort of solidify the standing of your heart. And always remember that your heart is not the organ in your body. As the ulama Imam Ghazali and Shawliullah mentioned, your heart, your qalb, is that direct link between you and the heavens. Your qalb, there is a physical organ, piece of heart in your flesh, but the actual qalb that Allah mentions in the Quran, that is that darwaza, that is that barrier and gate between you and the malaika, the angels, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what that means. Right? That's why in the hadith of when the Holy Prophet says that when you commit a sin, there's a dark spot that comes on your heart. That is that metaphysical heart that lives within us. That's not the actual piece of organ in our body. And this is important to remember. That what does it mean to have a heart? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, قُلْ سِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَانْظُرُوا كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الْمُكَذِّبِينَ. Literally journey on the earth to see what happened. What happened, right? And all of us as Muslims who have been born in this world, we all suffer with this question that what went wrong? Truly, what went wrong, right? Don't we all suffer with that question? How do we address this question, right? And I think that looking at the past can give us a sense of solitude, a sense of solace, but more importantly, grounding us, right? Of that who we are and where do we come from as an ummah? Because what is the difference between an ummah and a qawm, or a nation? What is the difference between an ethnicity and an ummah? Does anybody know? What is the difference between an ummah and a nation? An ummah shares in values. We share in values, in Islamic ethical values of the ibadah of Allah. Whereas a nation or ethnicity shares in language, or blood type, or phenotype, right? But as an ummah, we share in values, that we share the same prophet, right? Who is a carrier, a repository of values, right? And so what is the system of values, right? And as I mentioned yesterday, it starts with wahy, it starts with revelation that pours into the heart and the fitrah of Allah, of the Holy Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. So I just wanted to mention some few short stories of how did Islam spread, right? Does anybody know how many majority Muslim countries there are today?
30. 48.
They say about 51, 52. That's wild, right? 52 Muslim majority countries. So how did this happen? How did Islam spread so far? But more critically, and a question that always blazes in my mind, is that why did Muslims, generation after generation, choose to keep Islam in their family? For generation after generation, whether you go to Thailand, Muslims have been in Thailand for 600 years. Why did people on an island of Thailand choose to be Muslim for 600 years? Generation after generation. What is it about Islam that did that? More importantly, why would various tribes in Thailand, in Malaysia, Indonesia accept Islam in the 12th, 13th century? Right? That's something to think about. Right? And so what is it that moved them? Right? And it always begins with the Holy Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. But more importantly here, it begins with the Sahaba. Right? That how did the Prophet raise a generation of people? Raise a generation of people to spread Islam. You know, by the end of the Khilafah of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, Islam was in Libya all the way to the borderlands of Iran, to the borderlands of Armenia. That's just 8 years after the Holy Prophet's passing. 8 years. Right? And so how did this happen? Where did this happen? And more importantly, you and I as American Muslims, we hope that we will build a civilization here based on our values. So what does that look like? Because the reality is that before Islam entered Iran, Iran was about a 90% fire worshipping and 10% Christian country. Today it is about 98% Muslim. Libya is 99.9% Muslim. Right? These are wild statistics. So how did this happen? How did this come to be? Right? Where 1400 years Muslims have chosen to stick by this faith and this religion. Right? Can we say the same, you know, for America in 300 years? Will Islam remain? I don't know. Maybe you know, in South America, in Latin America, tens of thousands of Muslims came from Syria and Palestine and Lebanon to countries like Argentina and Brazil, and about less than 1% are still Muslim today in South America. That's just 90 years. A whole generation of Muslims sort of wiped out. Right? And that's something that we have to be concerned about, that if we are Muslims who have carried this amana, this trust, right? Sanadan and tawaturan from the Sahaba and from the Holy Prophet, where can we implement that for generations to come? So that, you know, in the same way that when we walk through countries like Egypt and Jordan and Syria and we see their ma'athir, their traces, and we reflect, may it be so too that 500 years later in America, they will walk through and see what we have also accomplished. And that is something that we should all aspire and hope for. Right? And because the reality is that if you and I believe Islam is the truth, and we all do, then why would we be insecure to share that with other people? If we believe that Islam has truth, has healing, has beauty, as Allah says, shifa'un lima fi sudur, that if we do believe that, then why would we feel insecure to share that with other people, especially today, when people need that kind of healing more than in any other era? I always tell people that people, the fact that West Africa is now 99% Muslim is not shocking to me. Because people do not need Islam in as much as they need it today. And that is truly something that I believe in. The amount of spiritual, physical and material destruction that plagues all of us as humanity has really rent apart the human being. This idea of shurud, that people are wandering in a desert, right? People don't know where they are, right? People don't know where home is, right? This idea of what does it mean to have a home? What does it mean to have a mother? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls Surah Fatiha Suratul right? The motherly surah. Allah calls the Prophet An-Nabiyyun Ummi, the motherly prophet, because you find home with the Prophet. You find home with Surah Fatiha. And this idea is that through Islam, we may be able to yet provide a home again for another population, right? Think about, why did Allah bring so many Muslims here? You know, what are we, 8-9 million Muslims? You know, in America, right? And so what is that purpose, that amana, that trust, right? To carry these ethical values from the heavens to this world. Anyways, during the last days of the Holy Prophet's passing, alayhi salatu wasalam, this hadith is mentioned in Bukhari, he sent out a katiba or a sariya, a small military detachment to the border of Jordan and Syria under the generalship, does anybody know who? Sayyidina Usama bin Zayd radiallahu anhu. So Sayyidina Usama bin Zayd takes 2,000 Muslims, travels to the border of Jordan and Syria. In fact, rather, he is about to leave, the Prophet passes away. Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu becomes Khalifa. Many of the tribes in Eastern Arabia and Southern Arabia become, as we know, they leave Islam, they apostatize from Islam. Now the issue comes, Sayyidina Umar says that we have to send this battalion under Sayyidina Usama bin Zayd to go and fight these apostates, right? And Sayyidina Abu Bakr says no. Why? Because the Prophet had commanded Sayyidina Usama bin Zayd to travel to Jordan and Syria and face the Byzantines. So Sayyidina Usama bin Zayd sets out. And for context and historically, there are two major empires, right, that are sort of pincering the Muslim community. They are the Byzantines and the Sassanians, right? The Byzantines control what is today Egypt, Palestine, Syria, Egypt, Lebanon, Turkey, Armenia. Iran, what is the Sassanian Empire, controls Iraq, parts of Syria, Iran, Afghanistan, Azerbaijan, Georgia, parts of Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan. So these are these two sort of major global empires, right? And the community of the Holy Prophet is in the Arabian Peninsula. And the Arabian Peninsula, neither did it have agriculture, neither did it have gold, neither did it have wealth, neither did it have human capital, or even social capital, or any form of capital, right? Neither did they have military weaponry of any form of kind, neither did they have any form of sophisticated conveyances. None of that was present, right? And so that's why both empires did not pay any attention to this community. And you can see one of the blessings or one of the wisdoms of Allah choosing a prophet from Arabia, and there are many people have written books on this, is that because the Arabs had nothing, and because the Prophet had to raise a community from nothing, that meant that all peoples of all history could imitate them. Right? That to form a sunnah amongst a people who had nothing in terms of culture, in terms of civilization, what we say in Urdu is tahzeeb and tamaddun, they had none of that. And so for the Prophet to build an ethical community based on in a land that had no resources meant that all people from all time and all history could imitate them and take them as their muqtada, right? Because if the Prophet was sent to Iran or the Byzantine Empire, what people could say that, why would we, we are people that have, let's say they were in India or East Africa or Malaysia, they would say that, well, we don't have the same resources that they did, we don't have the same amenities that they did. But this is one of the wisdoms, right? That to send a prophet, obviously the main wisdom that the ulama say is that Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam had made a dua, as mentioned in Surah Ibrahim, that raise a prophet from amongst my people. رَبَّنَا وَبَعَثْ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا. So the Prophet said, أَنَا دَعْوَةُ Ibrahim, in a hadith in Darami, that I am the answered call of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam. Anyways, as Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu is managing the apostasy wars in the Arabian Peninsula, he's fighting a double front. So now he sends an army to go and take Syria. So he first sends Sayyidina Usama bin Zayd radiallahu anhu. Afterwards he sends Sayyidina Khalid ibn Walid. So Sayyidina Usama bin Zayd goes through the Arabian, so there were these Roman routes from Medina to Gaza. So Sayyidina Khalid ibn Walid takes that route. He leaves the Arabian Peninsula, goes into Jordan, and starts taking Byzantine cities. The first city that was taken was Butra. And he first takes that city, and this was sort of shocking because the Arabs had never conquered any territory from either empire before. So this is the first time that a non-Arab city is taken, what is located in present-day Jordan. And Sayyidina Khalid ibn Walid leaves Hijaz, goes across Arabia, then travels north into Iraq. And there are Christian Arabs and Zoroastrian Arabs who are living there, right? And what we have to remember, and as I mentioned, is that this is one of the wisdoms of Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Sayyidina Umar being the Khulafa. Shah Waliullah Muhaddith Dahlawi, who is the great Muhaddith and Hadith scholar of India, lived in the 18th century, he wrote a book called Izalatul Khafa fi Khalifat al-Khulafa, to show why is it that as Sunni Muslims, why do we believe that Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Sayyidina Umar are superior to Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu. And he wrote a 500-page book in Farsi to prove this. And one of the reasons why he mentions talking about the fadila or the tafdeel or the superiority of Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Sayyidina Umar is that he calls them the jawarih of the Prophet. He calls them the limbs of the Prophet. That they're able to fulfill the mission, the political and social mission of the Prophet. In just 2 Khalifas' time, the fact that 2 empires were brought to their knees, as we'll discuss, under 2 khalifas. Right? And this is one of the wisdoms that why Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Sayyidina Umar are given that station. In fact, in a hadith in Bukhari, the Holy Prophet said, لَوْ كَانَ بَعْدِي نَبِيٌّ لَكَانَ عُمَرٌ. If there were a prophet after me, it would be Sayyidina Umar. And Mulana Rumi will read some of his poetry after that sort of alludes to this. Right? That how are they fulfilling the mission of the Prophet? How are they spreading the values of Islam to people who need it? Right? And this is what many scholars mention, that the mission of Islam ended, i.e. revelation ended, but the world mission of the Prophet continues until the Day of Judgment. That even Imam Mahdi will continue the world mission of the Holy Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. Anyways, Sayyidina Khalid begins to take cities. He takes cities in Jordan, and then he goes across into Iraq. So he's battling at the same, with just maybe they say 4,000 to 6,000 troops, half Sahaba, half Tabi'een, and he's battling armies. So he goes, and we know the Tigris and the Euphrates River. I wish we had a map that we could display to make this easier. He's going back and forth, and the Muslims besiege Damascus. Sayyidina Khalid, most old cities in those days would have four walls. Even when you go to Lahore and Delhi today, you can see many of these old pre-modern cities have four gates into the city. And Sayyidina Khalid ibn Walid besieges one part of the gate. Another Sahabi, I believe it's Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah, besieges another part of the city. And then another Sahabi, either Sayyidina Muawiyah or his brother Sayyidina Yazid ibn Abi Sufyan radiyallahu anhu, they besiege another part of the city. And as they're besieging the city, they're able to sort of take the city. Now, as they take the city, Sayyidina Abu Bakr passes away. It's about the same time when they take Damascus, and Sayyidina Abu Bakr passes away. Sayyidina Umar comes as the Khalifa, right? And Sayyidina Umar, anhu, as we know, Umar al-Faruq, he continues these missions, but now he wants to open a front against the Sasanian Empire. So he removes Sayyidina Khalid ibn Walid, and he appoints Sayyidina Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah as the main commander of forces in Damascus. So now they take Damascus. The Byzantines had 3 major cities. It was Constantinople, Damascus, and Alexandria in Egypt. These are the 3 major cities of the Byzantine Empire. So this was a huge hit, right? This is one of the major capital cities. So they take Damascus, and as they take Damascus, obviously now they're spoils of war, they have wealth, and now they're seen as a global player now, right? And this is sort of, when we're going to talk about the Taymuri Empire and the Seljuk Empire and the Mughal Empire, and we'll talk more about and the Ottomans, and we'll see how they sort of take this. But one of the major battle tactics of Sayyidina Khalid ibn Walid, he had 2, and this is, they used to call him Sayfullah al-Maslul, the unsheathed sword of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the 2 major battle tactics of Sayyidina Khalid is he had a pincer attack, right? That he would sort of separate his army into 2, divide it into 2, and he would try to sort of attack them from behind. So he would have one army engaging them from the front, and he would have another that would attack them from behind. A second battle tactic that he would do, based on the hadith of the Holy Prophet, al-Harb al-Khid'a, that he would fake retreat. And we will learn later on that when Genghis Khan sort of becomes the Khan, the Uyghur Muslims who would become his military advisors actually advise Genghis Khan about this battle tactic, where you feign retreat. So you start attacking and then you feign retreat, and as the army as the enemy starts to lose their sense of dominance, you attack again. They'll do it again in Qadisiyah when they take Iran. And as Sayyidina Khalid ibn Walid takes Damascus, goes into Iraq, now Sayyidina Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah is the commander. He starts taking multiple cities. He takes most of Palestine within a couple of months. That is the cities of Yafa, Haifa, Akka, Nasira, cities of Lebanon, Beirut, Tripoli. Most of them fall because the Iranians had devastated most of Palestine and Syria, as Allah mentions in the Quran, right? غُلَبَتِ الرُّومِ فِي أَدْنَى الْأَرْضِ وَهُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ غَلَبِهِمْ سَيَغْلِبُونَ. The Byzantines have been defeated, and soon they will overtake the Iranians. Right, so it was easy, sort of. It was a walkthrough, really, for Sayyidina Abu Ubaidah and Sayyidina Khalid. But obviously, what city is remaining now in Palestine? Jerusalem. Jerusalem being the holiest city for the Christians. So what they do is Sayyidina Khalid and Sayyidina Abu Ubaidah, they set up shop in the Golan Heights. Today it is an occupied Israel. Israel took it in 1967 from Syria. And when I went to occupy Palestine, you still have Salah ad-Din's castle and some settlements from early Muslims in the Golan Heights. It was ruled by Muslims continuously, for 1,300 years up until 1967. And so the Sahaba meet, and the patriarch of Jerusalem, his name is Sophronius, he says that we're not going to give the keys of the city until your Khalifa comes. So they write a letter to Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, and Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu rides from Medina all the way till Syria. He has one servant with him, and I'm sure many people have heard this story, and he has a servant, and they would alternate. So they would walk, let's say one day Sayyidina Umar would walk on, it's not a horse by the way, it's a camel, right? Because he'd given all the horses for the conquests, right? So he's walking, the servant is walking half the time, Sayyidina Umar is walking half the time. Now just so it happened, as they approach Jerusalem, it's the servant's turn to ride the camel. So all of the Christian priests are standing on the battlements of the city or the fort of the city of Jerusalem, and they're looking, and they think that Sayyidina Umar is the one riding the camel, but whereas Sayyidina Umar was the one walking, right? And this is this idea of, Allah says in the Quran, right? Muhammadur Rasulullah walladhina ma'ahu ashidda'u 'alal kuffari ruhama'u baynahum tarahum ruk'an sujjadan yabtaghuna fadlan min Allah wa ridwana. All they seek is just the fadl of Allah. All they seek is the grace of Allah. Right? Obviously this is a very high spiritual station that Sahaba reached because of the light and the barakah of the Holy Prophet that you and I don't necessarily have access to, alayhi salatu wassalam. But this doesn't mean that we can't learn from them, right? To see how they lived in the world. The great poet Muhammad Iqbal said that the brilliance of Sahaba ke all Musalman dar badashahi faqiri kardan. That in monarchy they were able to do what? To act as faqir, to act as people without homes. That how did they combine both? Despite the fact that all of these worlds, all of the spoils of war opened up to Sayyidina Umar and Sayyidina Uthman, why did it not affect them? And almost every Muslim king it affected them after. There's no doubt about that because they were not the Sahaba. But why is it so that Sayyidina Umar, who received spoils of war from two major empires, it didn't affect him? That is something to think about, right? I mean, the GDP of both empires probably would have been more than 50% of the world. And yet the GDP of both of those empires are falling at the feet of Sayyidina Umar. And the fact that it doesn't affect them is something, truly world transforming, something only that a prophet could inspire in people, alayhi salatu wassalam. Right? And that's the civilization, that we are inheritors of, right? Anyways, as Sayyidina Khalid ibn Walid is transferred to Iraq, they face a battle called the Battle of the Bridge. And this is in modern day Iraq, and this is the first loss that happens under Sayyidina Umar's rule, where the Iranians had brought elephants. And the Sahaba had never seen elephants to that point, and the elephants start stampeding. In fact, they say many of the Hufad of the Sahaba passed away during that battle. It was a loss for the Muslims. Obviously the Iranians and the Persians had sophisticated weaponry. They were under a general named Rustam, and many of the Sahaba, unfortunately, radiallahu anhum, get caught in the crossfire on that bridge, and they get suffocated and they die. And there was a leader from the city of Ta'if. His name was Muthanna, and he's able to sort of regroup some of the remaining Muslims, and he's able to sort of withdraw. Right, and now after the conquest of Syria is completed, right, and then the priest of Jerusalem gives the keys to Sayyidina Umar. All of Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan are under Muslim rule. Now they're able to send all of the Muslim army to take all of Persia, and this is all under the Khilafah of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. Right, and as now the Muslim army, now new recruits are being enlisted. Right, the Muslim army, they say it's about 28,000. Sayyidina Umar appoints Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu anhu. He is the first cousin of the mother of the Prophet, the mamu of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, as the commander of the army. Sayyidina Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, as one of the 10 promised paradise, starts to engage in battle. Now the major battle takes place, namely the Battle of Qadisiyah, and this is really a battle for all of Persia. The Persian army is about 80,000. And the Muslim army is about, they say about 25,000. Probably maybe 3,000 to 4,000 are Sahaba. And as they engage them, before the battle starts, there's a wild amount of negotiations and embassies that are exchanged. Imam al-Tabari spends about 160 pages just on conversations and dialogue between the Muslim camp and the Zoroastrian camp, just when this happens. I'll mention one or two stories. One either tabi'i or sahabi, his name is Rib'i. they say, send in one of your people, right? And because the Prophet had said that whenever you go to a Muslim land, you have one of three options. One is that you submit. The other is that you pay jizya and you protect all of your property. Or the third is that we face you in war. And this is coming from the command of the Prophet. And so this Muslim, his name is Rib'i, he comes in, and obviously the Persians want to impress the Muslims, right? So they have silk brocade couches, they have wine sort of splayed out, they have all this gold and silver banners sort of hanging. This is both in the Persian Chronicles and in the Muslim Chronicle, by the way. This Muslim comes in, and they have this gold brocade couch laid out for him, and he's dressed in tattered robes. His case for his sword is just sheep cloth, and he takes out his sword and he just pierces it in the gold brocade cushion, and he sits down to show that he is not someone of the dunya, right? And he's not here for the dunya, right? And this is something that you can see in all of these, especially in early Islam, the amount of wealth that was shown. And these are people who have never seen wealth before. The kind of wealth that the Persians and the Byzantines have, the Sahaba have never seen this kind of wealth before. And this is the first time they're seeing it, and it's not affecting them at all. You know, and this is that high level, right, of spirituality that the Holy Prophet is able to inspire amongst the Sahaba, alayhi salatu wasalam, that Allah alludes to in the verse, right? These are the people that Allah is pleased with. The general, his name is Rustam, he asks this Rib'i that, what do you want? He says that we are here to turn people away from being slaves of kings to being slaves of Allah. And we are people here from turning to stop the expropriation of wealth that is happening in this land and to spread it justly, right? So not only is it a divine purpose, but it's also a just economic purpose, right? And we can see, especially when we look at statistics, I had an undergraduate professor who did a study of rosters of tabaqat works to see how long did it take for Iran to become majority Muslim. He looked at Spain and Iran, and within 250 years, both Iran and Spain become majority Muslim. Within just 200 years. Muslims have been in America for almost 60 years. How many Muslims have we converted? How many people have we converted? Right? Right? This is, within 200, can we say within 100, 200 years that we would be able to convert the majority of Americans to Islam? Right? And this, my professor was a, white Christian person who just looked at, archival records. And this battle ends, and the Muslims are sort of able. Again, the tactics are input. I don't want to go too much into it. And anyways, as Muslims continue, the last battle of Persia takes place, namely the Battle of Nahavan. The great poet Muhammad Iqbal said that this is the most important event in Islam, the Battle of Nahavan, because he said that this meant the fusion of the Arab Islamic and the Persian intellectual culture into one civilization. Right? And this meant that, and we see that, right, with people like Imam Ghazali, Imam Razi, Imam Bukhari, all of them come from the Persian Islamic civilization. See, Muhammad Iqbal says that this Battle of Nahavan allowed for this interaction and this dialogue of civilizations and cultures to take place, where Islam is elevated and old and batil ideas or false ideas are parsed out, and new ideas are synthesized within the tradition of Islam, and Islam is able to sort of really integrate all of these different civilizations within one ummah. I wanted to read some of the poetry of Maulana Rumi. When the Muslims take the southern Iran, today it's called Khuzestan. It's a predominantly Arab part of Iran, mostly Arabic speakers. When the general was captured and he was brought to Medina, his name was Hurmuz. And as he's brought in chains to the city, he asks someone that, where is your king? And they said that we don't have a king, but we have Amir al-Mu'mineen, we have a commander of the faithful, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. And he's asking people in the streets of Medina that, where is your king? And they said that, or where is your Amir al-Mu'mineen? They said that we don't really know. And one boy said that, he's sleeping in the corner of the city. And as Hurmuz is walking, he sees Sayyidina Umar in the heat of day, sleeping on dirt. And he has his whip, and he has his sort of thobe as a pillow, and he's just sleeping. And this is the person who brought down the Byzantine and the Sasanian Empire to their knees.
and he's shocked.